Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says parents in the province will still need to grant permission before a student under the age of 15 can use a different name or pronoun at school. This is just one of the many points the Premier outlines in a video that she posted today about her gender identity policy. Julia Wong is tracking this breaking story from our Edmonton newsroom at this hour. So, Julia, good evening to you. Take us through what Danielle Smith said.
So Travis, there's a lot in this 7-minute video that was posted to social media only about an hour and a half ago, but three main things have really jumped out from what the Premier said. The first is gender reassignment surgery. The Premier says that young transgender Albertans who are 17 and under will not be allowed to get top and bottom surgeries. Now, the Canadian Pediatric Society already says that bottom surgery is already restricted to Canadians who are 18 and older. For those who are 15 and younger, she says that puberty blockers and hormone therapy for gender reassignment purposes, well, that will also not be allowed. You referenced schools earlier, and we know that there's been a lot of controversy across the country when various provinces have announced pronoun policies. We have a clear idea of what we can expect in Alberta. The Premier says that parents must be notified and give consent before a child can change their name or their pronoun if they are 15 years old or younger. If they are 16 or 17, she says parents must be notified, but they do not have to give their consent. She then goes on to say that if a parent rejects that or becomes abusive to their child, well, she says that's where child protection laws will come into play. In that 7-minute video, again, a lot to cover, but we just want to play you a little bit of what the Premier said. Take a listen.
Prematurely encouraging or enabling children to alter their very biology or natural growth, no matter how well-intentioned and sincere, poses a risk to that child's future that I, as Premier, am not comfortable with permitting in our province.
Now, another thing that Smith touches on is what happens in sports league, in sports competitions. She says that she's noticed there are unfair advantages when girls and women are competing or playing against transgender women in those sports competitions. She says that the province will be working with sports groups so that women can compete in women-only divisions, and she says that the province will also work with those groups to ensure that transgender athletes can compete in gender-neutral or co-ed divisions.
Okay, so Julia, the story breaking just in the past hour, but there's already a lot of reaction on social media. Tell us about that reaction so far that we're seeing.
Yeah, that reaction has been swift and fast and furious. I can tell you that just a few moments ago, NDP leader Rachel Notley tweeted that the NDP will have more to say on this tomorrow, but she does want to say that I want you to know right now you are loved and welcome to young transgender Albertans. We also heard from Chris Wells, who is the Canada Research Chair for the Public Understanding of Sexual and Gender Minority Youth. He calls this draconian legislation. He says, quote, "It is a full-on attack against trans and 2S LGBTQ plus communities. It is not only immoral, it is illegal." I want to move on to Thomas Lukaszuk, who is a former Deputy Premier for Alberta for the Progressive Conservatives. He says that Smith will show kids what true homophobia looks like and says that Alberta will feel like Alabama. Also, former Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi tweeted, and you may recall that he backed the NDP in the last provincial election. He says that this policy was communicated well and with compassion, but he says that it goes further than what we've seen in other provinces and was done with almost zero consultation. And you can imagine that will be one of the main questions that is posed to the Premier tomorrow. Now, this video was released and there was an opportunity for media to ask questions, but the Premier will be holding a press conference in Calgary tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, Julia Wong on the breaking news for us this evening from our Edmonton newsroom. Thank you, Julia. Appreciate it. Let's get more now. For more on this, I'm joined by Susan Gapka. She is a community and political organizer. She's also a trans activist. She joins me here in studio. Susan, thanks for joining me. I mean, this news came out very late. You rushed to get here to the studio, but I know that you saw that video. Let me get your reaction first to what Premier Danielle Smith had to say.
First of all, thank you for inviting me here tonight to give comment. It's been a long time since we've had this kind of news. For myself, I just try to imagine myself, you know, when I was a teenager going to high school, and if I had watched this video, and how I would feel so isolated, so traumatized to think that I was being treated differently than all my other classmates. If I was questioning or wondering, I should talk to the teachers or the adults or my friends about how I felt inside, like I actually did about 60 years ago. And You know, it was different back then when I was a child.
But what about Danielle Smith's argument that the parents really should have a say here, and some of these children are too young to be making these decisions for themselves when it comes to, you know, the pronouns and also the issues of, you know, puberty blockers, etc.
Misinformation. She's got the textbook from that person that came and visited, obviously the blueprint. But could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, okay. Tell me how you think that this will affect the well-being of transgender students.
Well, I think this set of procedures that I've helped build in Canada over the last couple decades is because a lot of children didn't feel safe at home talking to their parents. They needed a safe space. This will put teachers at risk. What do? They want to help the child. They want to talk to the parents. Hopefully, and I know Faye said this just the other day, just 2 days ago, that you know, we have more accepting families and parents than ever before. But what I do know is that if you can't be your authentic self and you don't have a safe environment, the rate of suicidality and self-harm dramatically increases. It's about 67%. If we have social supports like teachers and families in our neighborhoods, that rate drops dramatically. And we want our children, we all love our children. We want them to live and grow up to be full, actualized human beings.
But for, you know, people that are younger than 15 years old, for children that are younger than 15, why should parents not have a say in this?
One piece of misinformation that I saw in the video clip was that youth don't have access to gender-affirming surgeries. We want them to have safe spaces to talk about it, to be able to get to get therapy, to be able to go through and see, this is really who I am. We just don't make these decisions like we decide what we're going to have for breakfast in the morning, or we don't become trans by depending on, you know, like, oh, what clothes will I wear today? This is a very deep-held personal belief system of who we are, just like everyone else. And so we need to proceed carefully and not.
So you don't think this is careful and fully thought out?
I saw a lot of misinformation, especially around the athletes and the comments around an unfair advantage. I'm an athlete. I benefit from mental health wellness, and I do a lot of running. I didn't bring my medals here because, you know why? I usually come near the end of the pack. And so the idea that we have a competitive advantage in sports and recreation, the very thing that can help improve our health and well-being, is now going to be out of reach for many young people.
So Julia Wong there was going through some of the reaction that's coming in. True homophobia, Alberta will become Alabama, and you know, continues to roll in. Do you agree with those sentiments? And what do you think this means for potentially other provinces looking at what Alberta is doing right now? We know that, you know, Saskatchewan has similar legislation in place.
And that legislation needed the notwithstanding clause to be brought in because the courts rule the legislation as being unconstitutional. That will happen in Alberta, but it's misinformed, and it's really sort of looking at sort of a core base of people. But that's not the values I believe we live in Canada. And you know, there was a time when we were trying to get gender-affirming surgery in Ontario because the Conservatives had cut it here. And do you realize the only province that funded it? Alberta. So we've come a long ways and in the wrong direction with the Premier of Alberta.